I found butterfly sunglasses that happen to be pink. Found these a couple of weeks ago on clearance. And I'm like, oh, those will work perfectly for the Reiju video. Although I'm not doing the whole video while I wear them. Okay, time to talk about Reiju Vinsmoke, or Vinsmoke Reiju, depending on which way you want to put it. She is the eldest daughter of the Vinsmoke family of Vinsmoke Judge and Vinsmoke Sora. She is the only princess of the Germa family, and she is the older sister of Ichiji, Niji, Sanji, and Yonji. She is also poison pink and is, of course, one of the commanders in the military army aspect of the Germa Kingdom, the Germa Double Six. And besides Sanji, she is my favorite member of the family, followed very closely by Sora, and then pretty much the boys just fall to the wayside, as does Judge. Because he's a jerk. He's so much worse than a jerk. In regards to Reiju, Reiju is 24 years old. She's 3 years older than her brothers. And pretty much from what we've seen throughout the story and the background that we get from her is that about 24 years ago she was born, and to Sora and Judge. And from what we can tell, Judge did not experiment on her while she was, in the womb, while she was in vitro. But then after she was born, Judge then did some experiments on her. And those resulted in her having some of the physical modifications that would then later be applied to the boys. And then about 3 years later, when Sora was pregnant with the boys, with her brothers, Reiju is the one that witnesses this huge argument between her mother and father about the genetic enhancements Judge wants to apply to the boys while they are still in vitro. And they are still in the womb. And what ends up happening is, of course, Sora is very much against it. Mostly she's against giving them these enhancements and taking away any of their quote-unquote negative or weak emotions in Judge's opinions. And of course, Sora's answer are, those are the emotions that help make them human, that give them compassion and empathy and, kindness and things like that. And of course, Judge views all of those as weaknesses. So, we know that Sora is unfortunately forcibly put through this procedure, and Reiju is probably pretty scared of her father for the majority of her youth. Probably still is semi-scared of him anyway, given other things that happened. But what we end up seeing is, of course, Sora goes through the procedure, and then as an attempt to try to counteract it, she drinks the poison or the chemical or whatever, but it still results in the boys being born, and Sora then just spends the rest of her days very, very sick and in the infirmary ward. And from there, basically what we see from Reiju is she seems to spend her time between going and visiting her mother and telling her father, how Judge has been treating them, and then being around Judge and having to act obedient, and being around her brothers and having to laugh whenever Ichiji, Niji, and Yonji bully Sanji. We also see that her and the boys are put through lots of training and exercises and tests and everything like that to make sure that their physical enhancements are working the way that they're supposed to. And Sanji is, of course, the only one who it doesn't seem to have applied to, and at this point in time, Reiju has had the procedures done on her as well. She still has her emotions. Judge was not able to get rid of her emotions. That's never quite explained, but she does unfortunately have the same quote-unquote programming to follow Judge's orders as do the boys. Not as obediently as they do, because we do see that she is able to work her way around them in regards to just finding loopholes that she can exploit, and she does. And we also see that during this time frame, she is also the only one outside of their mother who shows any form of kindness to Sanji. And, after the boys beat Sanji up, she generally goes and, helps patch him back up, band-aids and bandages and everything like that. And she's like, I'm sorry that I have to keep laughing at you whenever they do this, but if I don't, then they're going to be mean and pick on me too and beat me up too. Which is true. As the person who's been bullied, that is very true. Although not nearly to the extent that Sanji has been bullied. But what ends up happening is, of course, during this time frame, Reiju goes and visits their mother a lot. And they have lots of these conversations, like Sora tells her when Sanji came and visited her and brought her the snack and everything, brought her the meal that he made, and she, and how happy Sora is that Sanji at least has his emotions that make him human and such. And from what we can tell, Judge doesn't seem to necessarily have a huge problem with Reiju visiting Sora. He just doesn't seem to like it when Sanji goes and does it. And as I stated, we have no idea if the other 3 boys ever go and visit Sora or not. That has never been explained one way or the other. But Reiju tends to spend a lot of time with her mom. And of course, for the first 3 years of her life, she was the only child. And then, of course, she's the only one that has enough freedom to a degree to be able to go and visit their mother now without, worrying about, being attacked or anything like that. Like Sanji gets attacked by a dog on his way to deliver the snack that he made to his mom. The other things that we see happen are, of course, during this time frame is after Sora's death, which, hits hits Reiju and Sanji the hardest out of all of the siblings, which makes sense because the other 3 have no emotions or have no negative emotions, and being able to be sad would be a negative emotion in Judge's opinion. And, Judge doesn't even seem sad necessarily at the loss of his wife. But during this time frame is, of course, from Reiju's perspective, is, of course, when, Judge fakes Sanji's death and then locks him up in the dungeon with the iron mask and everything and leaves him there. And eventually the 3 boys find out where Sanji is, and Reiju probably figured out where he was anyway, because she does seem smarter than the 3 boys to begin with and much more observant. And so she probably knew where Sanji was anyway and was either trying to avoid him so the other 3 wouldn't find him, or, went and visited him at times, but still did it, infrequently so the boys wouldn't follow her. But, of course, we know that by the time, they climb the red line and make their way into the East Blue, by then, the boys know where Sanji is. They've been coming and beating him up, and Sora and Reiju has been showing up probably to do the same thing that she did before, where she would, patch him up and everything like that to the best of her abilities. And during this whole time, she's probably still been going through any lessons and training and everything like that, that, she's been aware of and all of that. And when, they climb the red line, and of course, while they're, once they're into the East Blue and on their way to Cozy Eye, I believe is the name of the kingdom they are attacking, Reiju goes down to the cellars, goes down to the dungeon where Sanji is, and she uses her enhanced strength to rip the bars open on Sanji's cage so that way he's able to get out. And from there, she then helps him get through the castle to, I believe, to their father's room, where they then, where Sanji has to then get the key so that way he can unlock his mask. Otherwise, he'll be trapped in it for however long. And, Reiju waits outside because she doesn't want Judge to see her in case he shows up. And, of course, she hears the conversation of Judge telling Sanji that, fine, you can leave. We fake that you died anyway. You leave, and we will, we will forget about you, and you never claim to be a member of the Vinsmoke family, and so on and so forth. And so then Sanji gets the key and unlocks the mask, and then Reiju brings him to the coast where there is the cruise ship that is the Orbit. And she's telling Sanji, I don't remember if this quote is said at this point in time when she's trying to tell him to leave, or when she's trying to convince him to just let her and their father and brothers die at the wedding. And it's like, just abandon Germa and run away, Sanji. Our family and kingdom has been too blinded by their past glory to have any hope of redemption. They're nothing more than destroyers. This world has no need for them. But there is this moment when Reiju is, sending Sanji off. And it is to a degree very similar to in regards to what happened with Robin when she was leaving Ohara, when Saul was trying to get her away from Ohara and everything like that. That, the whole, no one was born into this world to be alone. Someday, the world is vast, and, someday you'll find real friends, and, all of that stuff. And Reiju kind of does a similar thing with Sanji, where she's just like, go out there, find your dream, go after it. By this point in time, Sanji's kind of thinking about trying to find the All Blue and wanting to be a chef, because he's been training with that and everything in the dungeon. And reading about that. So, Reiju was like, go, this is your best chance. You have to go. You have to leave here and go off. And Sanji doesn't, of course. Reiju is, just bawling her eyes out at this point in time because, of course, their mother is already dead. She doesn't really have a huge emotional connection in regards to her father or her brothers beyond fear or obedience in both cases to a degree. And, Sanji is the only one that she has left that she really loves. And she's doing this for his own good. And what she believes is his own good, and what actually is his own good. Because if he just stays in the Germa kingdom, in the cellars, eventually Judge is just going to kill him anyway, probably. Or do something to just torture Sanji until he becomes obedient the way his brothers are. And she doesn't want that to happen to Sanji, so she, of course, has released him and, uses her power to do this. However much Judge is aware that Reiju is the one that does this is a little bit left up for debate. But it's like he probably figured it out. Judge is at least smart enough to figure that out in regards to, process of elimination and deduction and everything. So, Sanji heads off. Reiju watches as he goes and is probably just praying to whatever higher power that is listening, that, to their mother, just to watch over Sanji and keep him safe and everything. And he does. And she, then returns back to the kingdom, back into the German kingdom. And she is there for the next, 13, 14, whatever years, 12, 13 years or so. All the way up until when we finally get to the Whole Cake Island arc. Now, during the in-between time frame, it is pretty much assumed that Reiju has been training. She's gotten her raid suit in this time frame. She's trained in military tactics and fighting and how to use her, poison powers and everything like that. Has probably had other modifications done to her, as have the boys. Has been on lots of different missions in regards to their mercenary work and assassination and everything along those lines. Probably has been undercover at various points in time. And has spent lots of time doing that stuff, because even though she does not agree with what their father is doing, she unfortunately does not have the liberty to be able to leave during this time frame. So she's kind of stuck with what she has to do. And, she's still a princess. She's still treated very well inside of the castle. And I also have a feeling that at times she has had to put her brothers in their place in regards to messing with her or messing with her personal servants, because as much as we see that the boys and Judge really don't care for any of their servants within the castle, particularly how they treat Cosette and probably how they treat the maids, Reiju probably tries to treat them at least as well as she can in regards to wanting to make sure that, at least she treats them well, and that if they're part of her personal staff, she makes sure that maybe the boys don't touch them. in regards to, like, you touch my staff, in regards to you touch the ones that are part of my personal staff, and you will be in a lot of pain, type of a thing. Also, it is never, I don't know if it's ever been stated in regards to the way that Judge intends for, like, I don't know, the inheritance to work in the Germa Kingdom, because we have no idea about that, whether or not Reiju, as the firstborn, is the one who would become queen of, you know, the Germa Kingdom should Judge die, or if it would be Ichiji because he's the firstborn boy, or if it's strongest is the one that gets it. And I don't know, it's like Reiju is pretty strong in regards to, in regards to all of the children. I mean, technically the strongest out of all of them is Sanji. But he wants nothing to do with that. But there is, like, that question that could be brought up of, like, what type of inheritance is it? Is it, first, primogenitors and the first male gets everything? Is it firstborn? That's left up for debate. Going into stuff that happens in Whole Cake Island, I mean, it can be assumed that, like, during the time frame once Sanji and the rest of the Straw Hats get their first bounties and subsequent bounty posters, in his lobby, and then, at, in regards to what happens at Sabaody, that it is very, very possible that, like, Reiju sees the bounty poster for Sanji, and, like, I just have it headcanon that, like, her and her father and brothers are sitting there, and they end up getting the newspaper and they're reading it, and Judge is, like, furious that, like, Sanji has a bounty poster. Like, they figure out that it's Sanji pretty easily. I mean, he doesn't look that different except he's older. But it's this horrible drawing of a bounty poster, and they're like, okay, well, is that him? We know that they seem to try to track down Duval, and then they're like, yeah, no, that's not Sanji. And then later on, they do figure out that it's Sanji, but I just have this, like, headcanon that, like, once it's confirmed that it's Sanji, that Reiju has, like, one of those posters, even the horribly, horribly drawn ones, until they get the better ones that they get after Sabaody and Fishman Island, where they get, like, their updated bounty posters and everything like that, that Reiju has a copy of it, and she just has it, like, somewhere in her room, so that way she can at least, look at her brother every now and then, as like one of his biggest fans beyond, like, everyone at the Baratier. I want to see Reiju and Zeph meet. I want that to happen. I want that to happen. I also just want Zeph to, like, kick Judge in the face. And kick all three boys, because they definitely need an attitude adjustment. But he would just look at Reiju and just go, "Ma'am, your table is ready. Let's talk about your brother." He's an idiot. I know, but please tell me more stories about how he grew up, type of a thing. Like, Reiju and Zeph getting along would just be wonderful. I want that to be something that happens at some point in time, like, even post story, like in the prologue or whatever, where it's just like, yeah, Reiju and Zeph met and they just had fun talking about Sanji. That would be great. But going into Whole Cake Island, where we are actually introduced to Reiju first time chronologically in the story, is when Luffy and the Sanji retrieval team are on their way to Whole Cake Island, of course, or on their way to Totland to try to save Sanji from Big Mom and get him back. We have it that, of course, they end up coming across part of the Germa fleet that is one of the giant snail ships where Reiju and Yonji is. During this time frame, Luffy has, of course, eaten this very, very poisonous, flesh of this fish that they found. And even with his high resistance to poison, he's still, of course, very badly poisoned. Yonji tries to just like, yeah, we'll give you an antidote if you, pay us or whatever. And then Reiju just, like, up and kicks him and sends him flying, which I love. And then, of course, she comes down. And, of course, we keep getting the moments where, like, they're like, Sanji. Wait, no, that's not Sanji. She's pink and a girl. And then, of course, the other one's, no, that's not Sanji. He's green. And his hair's wrong. And, what ends up happening is, of course, Reiju comes down and she ends up kissing Luffy and sucks all of the poison out of him. Well, just like all of the rest of like Nami and Brook and Chopper and Pedro and Peckham's and Carrot are all just like, oh my, type of a thing. Just like sucks all the poison out of him, and we see her, her wings grow and everything like that. In regards to, showing off, her, sucking out the poison, and then Luffy's fine. Because, of course, because she's poison pink, her powers allow her to eat and nullify poison. And she likes to eat all these different types of poisons, like the way that Magellan does, except she doesn't have the drawbacks of having to spend long hours of the day on the toilet, unlike as Magellan does. From there, they talk a little bit, and I think it is revealed that, I think she reveals to the Straw Hats that she is Sanji's sister. And she thanks them for taking care of Sanji, and then her and Yanji head off again, and they make their way back to Whole Cake Island, where the Germa Kingdom is, reforming. And from there, that is when Reiju finally gets reunited with Sanji. And he is, of course, not happy to be in this situation at all. He doesn't want to be here. He doesn't want to have to marry Pudding or anything like that. He doesn't want to have to be around his family again. Around his biological family again. Which is fair, given his history. And, of course, Reiju is like... She's kind of... I mean, like, she's trying to get Sanji to try to play along for the time being. And he's giving her the cold shoulder. She's like, we have all these lovely maids, and you would have that at your disposal. You'd be a prince again. Blah 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 blah. You'll be marrying a daughter of, of one of the Yonko, so you'll be well taken care of there and everything like that. And Sanji, of course, wants nothing to do with it. And of course, they talk about the giant painting that just shows off Judge's ego, and then of course Judge shows up and he's talking with Sanji, and then of course Sanji and Judge go out and they fight, and then Sanji is winning the fight, and then Judge cheats by having his the clones run in and take the attack for block Sanji's attack, because Sanji's not going to attack innocent civilians. Or innocent bystanders, and then Judge uses that and he cheats and attacks Sanji, and then of course that leads to Judge is attempting to put Sanji in his place, and after that is when Sanji has to have the exploding handcuffs put on him, and Reiju is the one that puts them on him. And he's told that, they'll explode. And then later on, Reiju ends up telling him, no, they're not explosive. I swapped them out for these fake ones, so don't worry about it. And then, of course, they have just these other moments where, of course, Ichiji and Niji have returned from the Burakoli Island and dealing with that and everything. Reiju and Sanji keep talking, and of course somewhere in this time frame is of course when they have their family dinner, and of course everything happens with Cosette, and Reiju is just kind of watching off to the side as Sanji stands up for Cosette, and she's just kind of smiling and happy to see her brother standing up for someone who clearly needs it. And then they have this whole conversation, because afterwards what happens is, of course, Cosette gets beat up, and then Sanji finds her, and then Sanji, goes and finds out all the information about the cloning technology, and that, their father used to work with Vegapunk, and then, of course, ends up being that, he gets beat up by the three boys, and then, of course, Reiju shows up and drags Sanji back to her room, where she has to put that, mask on him, so that way it'll, hide the fact that, put the mask on him, so that way it'll hide the fact that he's injured. And of course, then they have this big conversation about Zeph. And this is in this time frame when, Sanji is aware that Zeph is under threat, and Reiju's just like, well, why don't you just forget about him and leave? And Sanji's like, I can't. He's my family. He's the man who raised me. And all of that stuff. And, she's learning about Sanji's chivalry because, he didn't really have that before he left. Mostly just because it wasn't a concept that he'd been introduced to at that point in time. In regards to the chivalry that Zeph instilled in him about, a man shouldn't hit a woman. It's, been the ancient laws since the time of the dinosaurs type of a thing. And while I appreciate that concept, you really shouldn't be hitting anybody, in all honesty, but I appreciate the concept. And what ends up happening is, of course, Reiju just finds this very interesting. And, then she just kind of leaves, and then, of course, the next day or whatever it is, or that evening or whatever, is when they head to, they make their way out into Whole Cake Island on their way to Whole Cake Chateau. And during this time frame is, of course, when Luffy and Nami show up, and of course Reiju recognizes them because she's already met them. And of course she has to watch this as Sanji ends up fighting Luffy. And Reiju hates watching this. She hates watching Sanji have to fight who's clearly one of his best friends in Luffy, and who is his captain, and someone that he cares about, and that, Luffy cares about Sanji and everything like that. And she hates having to watch this fight. Hi, Brenda. I love you. And she hates having to watch this fight, but she has to, physically act like it doesn't bother her at all. And to a degree, violence to a degree is probably something she's become a bit numb to, just given being around her father and her brothers and the line of work that they're in and everything like that. But she's, she also is just, she doesn't like that it has to be her brother that has to go through this. And then, of course, Sanji has knocked Luffy down, and he, gets slapped by Nami, and then he gets back on the carriage, and then they keep going. And of course they arrive at the Whole Cake Chateau. They're greeted by the Charlotte family. They go in and they have their big dinner, lunch, whatever, with Big Mom, and where Sanji meets Pudding for the first time. And then, of course, they all kind of had their separate ways to a degree. Sanji gets taken to his own room after him and Pudding have, their big discussion. And Reiju, along with Judge and the boys, go to the prison library, where they get to see all of the different books that Big Mom has that have all of her different prisoners pinned in them. Thanks to Montdor. And we don't really get much of Reiju's opinion of this, but she's there while it's happening. And then sometime later, after the lunch and after going to the library, there ends up being this moment where Reiju is just, she doesn't want to be around her father and her brothers. They're off basically having, just a night of drinking and everything like that. And she ends up wandering around. And of course, via what we find out in the memories, she is found by Pudding, gets shot in the leg by Pudding, and then is taken captive and taken back to Pudding's room, where she is then pinned to this chair and trapped by Nitro, who is Pudding's little personal gelatin homie, slime ball homie. I still think part of his soul came from Beji, or someone on Beji's crew. And, so then we get this scene where, Pudding is, reveals herself to Reiju and everything like that, and Reiju is just like, but why are you doing this? And Pudding just reveals the whole plan to Reiju, just like, well, tomorrow at the wedding ceremony, I'm going to kill Sanji on top of the cake, and then my siblings are going to kill you and your father and your other brothers, while everybody, while you're all distracted and, lulled into a false sense of security. And then I'm going, and then Mama is going to take all of your cloning technology and your clones and use it for herself. And Reiju is, of course, kind of like the A, why are you doing this in the first place? We have an alliance. B, why are you telling me all of this? And C, did you even care at all about Sanji in regards to meeting? And of course, she has to watch as Pudding is making fun of Sanji and mocking him and everything like that. And, so we have all this stuff that happens. And then, of course, we have the moment where Pudding then, messes with Reiju's memories. She, is like, well, the reason I told you all this stuff is because I can just mess with your memories and make it so you never knew what I said in the first place. And, pops all of the memories out of Reiju's head, and we see, Pudding mess with them. And then, Reiju is unconscious during all of this. And then, of course, when she wakes back up again, she is in the infirmary. And she's in the infirmary, her leg's been bandaged up and everything. And, of course, as far as she's aware, she just thought that she came across some soldiers who were being stupid and playing with guns. And one of the, bullets ricocheted and hit her in the leg. And she was brought here. And, of course, Sanji is standing there during this time frame and tells her that, no, that's not what happened, and explains to her that, no, Pudding mess with your memories, all of this is a trap, blah, 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 blah. And they have this conversation, and during this conversation is, Reiju reveals to him the conversation and the circumstances and her memories behind, him and their brother's births and everything. And explaining that their mother had given their life to ensure that at least one of them had the, capability to feel emotions and would not be corrupted by their father's plans. So Sanji is, of course, like, oh, so then it's my fault. And she's like, no, it is not your fault. She made that choice. And you are basically her, it's kind of like the whole concept of, like, inherited will and blah, 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 blah. And in this case, Sanji has inherited his will of kindness and everything like that from his mother. And that he is the embodiment of what she left behind. And my answer to that is, so is Reiju. Reiju is also the embodiment of what their mother left behind. Reiju freed her brother, hates what her father is doing, and tries to do whatever she can and to try to help Sanji. And during this conversation, she also just tells Sanji that just leave. Just go with your friends. Find your crew, leave with them, and just leave leave father and our brothers and I, and we'll die for all of the sins that we've committed as the Germa 66 and everything that all the pain we've caused and everything like that. Just leave us. And, so Sanji leaves, and Reiju is just kind of under the impression that that's what Sanji might do. Later, a little bit later, running around by the infirmary ends up being Luffy, runs past the room, Reiju groans out, grabs him and pulls him inside. And he's just like, oh wait, you're Sanji's sister. And she's like, yes. And she's like, are you looking for him? And Luffy's like, yes, I am. And she's just like, okay. He was here a little bit ago. And she finds out that Luffy's already aware of Pudding's deception and everything like that. And she explains that she tried to convince Sanji to leave the island and everything like that, and he still won't do that because he's still worried about Zeph, and he's still worried about them and the Straw Hats, and and even her. She thanks Luffy again Luffy thanks her because she tells him where Sanji went. And, of course, then he heads off after Sanji breaking through the window and everything, I believe. And then, of course, Reiju just spends the rest of the evening and into the next morning just, kind of watching out the window and everything like that. Probably got some sleep. I don't know. But then the next day, the morning of the wedding, her and her father and brothers are all dressed in their very nice regal royal attire. And, of course, they are all escorted to the top of the Whole Cake Chateau, where, of course, the big tea party / wedding is going to be taking place. And we have these moments where, of course, she's just kind of watching as everything happens. I think we see her talking to Charlotte Cinnamon and talking to, some of the other members of the Charlotte family, and, like, seeing some of the other, the underworld emperors and stuff like that, and just, talking to the other guests and all that stuff. And Reiju is, of course, kind of like, because she doesn't know what's going to happen. She's either under the impression that Sanji's going to show up and marry, Pudding and just go through with all of this, or he's going to have left with the Straw Hats, with his friends, so that way, he'll be safe, and then her and their father and brothers will just die in this circumstance. That's not what happens, of course. Sanji and Pudding ride in on Zeus and the teacup, and then, they're on top of the wedding cake, and then kind of all hell breaks loose, and of course, this leads to what I referred to as the candy-coated Vinsmokes, where the rest of the Vinsmoke family, Reiju, Judge, and the boys are all trapped at their table by Perospero's, candy fruit, or look like fruit powers, and they're all pinned, which again, we've seen how strong the Vinsmokes are. And at this point, they don't have their raid suits with them. Their raid suits were confiscated from them during this ceremony by Beji, which is, of course, part of the plan anyway. And, of course, what ends up happening is, I kind of say this goes to show you, like, how strong Perospero's candy is, because they can't escape. And, of course, later on, the Sunny gets pinned with the candy, and we have to Pedro sacrifices himself in order to free it. So they have the chance to escape. But, what ends up happening in this case is, of course, all of them, the rest of the family, are pinned to the table by the devil fruit powers. And from there, it ends up being, Reiju just kind of sits there and is just, like, accepting of her fate, in a different manner than her brothers are, because Judge is off to the side just, like, crying and everything like that. And she's just watching as, like, her brothers are just laughing at this, and are just very indifferent and amused and everything about this whole concept. And she's just like, yeah, this is the part of the consequences of taking away her brother's emotions, because it prevents them from being able to, understand their own imminent death and protest it and fight back against it and everything like that, because they have no concept of being sad that they're going to die or being scared or anything like that. And then, of course, what ends up happening is, of course, Sanji shows up, Diablo Jambe is onto the table, smashes all of the candy while this is going on. Of course, Big Mom is doing her big screaming and everything like that, her, wails of despair and everything, and releasing her, hockey, and, all of the children are covering their ears, and Sanji frees them from the table, and then Nami, Carrot, and Chopper all jump out and, put the earplugs into all the different Vinsmoke's ears and give them each their raid suits back, and, make sure that they're all free from the candy. And, of course, this leads to Judge and the others, we all get the great transformation sequence, that, reminiscent of Power Rangers and, Super Sentai and everything else like that. A little bit of Sailor Moon in there for Reiju. Love Sailor Moon. Sorry, Sailor Moon dork, get used to it. And, goes through all of that. And, and then, of course, we get the great family pose for all of them. And then, what ends up happening is, of course, they end up fighting against members of the Charlotte family. Reiju ends up clashing against Smoothie, trying to help Nami, and a bunch of that stuff happens. And then eventually they end up inside of Beiji's big father when he turns into his castle form and everything like that. And of course they're discussing what they're going to do. And what ends up happening is, of course, Judge is like, because he doesn't want to owe Sanji a debt, he's like, fine, we will, five of us will act as a distraction and allow you to escape with Beiji with everybody else inside. Fine. And that's what he does. Him and the rest of him and the children go out. Luffy follows them and ends up acting as a distraction as well. And they all end up fighting against different members of the Charlotte family. There ends up being something where they fight against Judge goes up and fights against Big Mom, as I mentioned, and he kind of gets knocked down. And then Reiju ends up getting hit with a combined attack between Smoothie and Galette and Daifuku and stuff like that. Then, of course, the Tamate Bako explodes and the whole cake chateau falls, and they use that as their chance to actually escape. And while Luffy's group and, the Beiji's crew, they all go off in their own direction. Reiju and the Vinsmokes go off in their other direction, and they make their way back to, their, puzzle islands. And end up getting there, and they go through and have to fight against the forces that are there. And they end up defeating the Big Mom forces that are there fairly easily, and then they, of course, with Niji contacting Muntor, pretends that they lost because Niji is mimicking the voice, using their tech, mimicking the voice of one of the siblings that had been sent, one of the Charlotte siblings that had been sent, and reported back that they had defeated the Germa, because then the Germa will be able to either escape on their own or be able to move around without having to worry about being noticed by any of the Charlotte family. And then, of course, the next time we see them is, of course, at Cacao Island, when Sanji has to go back to get Luffy out of the mirror, get Luffy off of the island after he's come out of the mirror. And, of course, all four of his siblings show up, and they are all fighting to help Sanji and Luffy escape. And, we also have these moments where, throughout this battle and throughout some of this other stuff, we have these moments where, the siblings all do, a combination attack together, which is kind of fun. And they end up fighting against the decuplets, who have, formed into the giant pink and white, whatever, Reaper thingy, purple, pink Reaper thingy. They all combine, and, of course, the Vinsmoke siblings have to fight against them, and, of course, they all help, Sanji escape the island. Sanji and Luffy escape the island and everything, and, of course, as they are trying to escape escape out of Totland, what happens is, of course, that's when the Germa Double Six have showed up. And, Reiju is just very wanting to get, Sanji and Luffy to escape, because she likes both of them. She loves Sanji, and she likes Luffy for the fact that he's, Sanji's friend and has helped him so much and everything. And so that's all happening. And, of course, the Germa kind of stay behind to help fight the Big Mom forces as the Straw Hats are able to escape. Presumably, they're also kind of helping the Sun Pirates that are there as well. Then we get into the Germa Double Six's an Emotionless Excursion story for the little cover story. And, of course, this just starts off where we see Reiju, Judge, and Ichiji just kind of sitting on their castle's balcony, and it's we get to reveal that Niji and Yonji got captured. So, Reiju and Ichiji make their way back to Cacao Island, or back to, they don't go to Cacao Island. That's where Brule thinks they were. But they end up making their way to Whole Cake Island, and they end up breaking into the laboratory, saving their brothers, and getting the Charlotte siblings to fight against each other, because Caesar has showed up and uses his gas to just make katakuri, and Oven just, trip balls. And then Reiju and her three brothers, along with Caesar now, end up making their way out of Whole Cake Island. This is, of course, happening concurrently when Pudding is being captured by Aokiji, or Kuzan, and Van Augur on Cacao Island, where all of that's happening. But what happens is, of course, the Vinsmoke siblings all plus Caesar, make their way back to the Saint Germain, which is the castle, the German castle. They make their way back there, and, of course, this is where Reiju and her siblings watch as Judge and Caesar just start arguing and everything. And then eventually it's they stop arguing and they're hey, why don't we just work together? And they just form Neomads. I want this organization to show back up and do something later on. Whether they end up getting paired with the Cross Guild or whether they end up getting paired with something else, I don't know. I want them to show back up. But what is my favorite part is like in the last panel where we see like Judge and Caesar like, yes, we're going to form Neomads. And then we just see like Reiju and Ichiji both just like in the background just letting out sighs of just like, I am so sick of your crap, Dad, and then like walking off panel. Okay. At the moment that I'm recording this, I do not know if we are going to see if we have seen Reiju in the most recent chapter or not. We saw Judge and Caesar during the message from Vegapunk, so we know that at the very least the Germa Kingdom is listening to the message going out from Vegapunk in regards to his worldwide message and all of that stuff. And of course, Judge and Caesar now, they're angry that Vegapunk is dead. So they'll probably do something stupid, reckless. And what I kind of wanted it to be was that, like, before we got this information about what was going to happen with the Vinsmokes and everything like that, I kind of wanted it to be that, like, not necessarily that Judge died, but just, like, Judge got far too injured from fighting Big Mom and the Charlotte family, that, like, he can't be king anymore, so Reiju just, like, beats her brothers into submission and becomes queen of the Germa Kingdom, and then just, is just like, screw this, we're not doing the mercenary shit anymore, we're not doing any of that stuff, we're gonna frickin' find a new home, and we're gonna stay there. Dad's an idiot, and the three of you are going to listen to me, because I'm your big sister. Type of a thing. That was kind of what I thought might happen, or something along those lines. I really would have liked it if, like, Reiju had managed to, like, leave with the Straw Hat so she could go with Sanji and they could have, like, be brother and sister on an adventure together. Reiju and Wano would have been fine. I mean, that would have been nice. Like, have her go, have Katakuri leave with the Straw Hats. That would have been good, too. That would have been good. So that would have been, fun there. But, like, I don't know what's going to happen. My thought is that, Judge and Caesar, as I said, are going to do something stupid and reckless with Neomads to try to prove themselves as better than Vegapunk. And Reiju and the boys are just going to have to, unfortunately, go along with it. Or do something to get away from their father. But I thought would be something that would be an interesting way of having Caesar get some type of just, like, mess with Judge would be for him to do something that, like, makes the three boys get their emotions back. And then they're just like, oh my God, what did we do all these years? Why did we act like this? Type of a thing. Not like a full, like, oh my God, existential crisis, but just like, damn, I feel bad for how we treated Sanji. And then Reiju's just, like, off to the corner reading her book and going, yeah, you should be. Keeps reading. Thing is, Reiju and Nami got along fine for the bits that they interacted with each other, and I think Reiju and Robin would get along fine as well. And I don't think Sanji would have a problem with wanting to have his sister on the crew, or at the very least have his sister around them for a while. She was the one family member he liked. To be fair, I don't expect it to be that, like, Neomads is gonna rock up on Laugh Tale or rock up at the world government and do something there, but I don't know. I want Reiju to show back up again. I want it to be that there was an explosion and Judge and Caesar got captured and then the siblings all left and Reiju moved to the East Blue and just goes and finds Zeph, and she just, like, kind of stays at the restaurant or something, has her own giant snail ship that she has, and took, like, Cosette and some of her staff with her, left the Germa Kingdom and all of that stuff and just went to the East Blue. And, like, Cosette goes and works at the Baratier as, like, the one female chef there. All of that. I would find that hilarious. I don't expect that to happen, but that would be funny. I just want there to be something in the epilogue where Reiju and Zeph meet, and it's just him just telling her all these embarrassing stories about Sanji growing up, about however many times he had to whack him with his peg leg, and how they met, and all of this other stuff, and just like all of these times where they would fight, and then other times where, you know, Sanji was just adorable and all of this other stuff. And, you know, Reiju's just like sitting there smiling fondly with just her hand on her, you know, her cheek resting on her hand, and she just listens and eats the food. And then like tells Zeph some of the stuff from when her and Sanji were growing up, and tells Zeph about their mother, about Sora and everything. Like, that whole concept, I love that. Like, I would love that as just something that happens in the epilogue. I would love that. I just headcanon, I want that to be what happens with Reiju in the epilogue. That she goes and her and Zeph get to talk. And just like, oh, so you're Sanji's sister. She's like, yes, I am. And he's like, so he's actually a prince. Yes, he is. Our father was a jackass, and our brothers followed in his footsteps, but Sanji didn't. He took after our mother, and like goes through everything, and, you know, just all of this stuff. Like, I want that to be what happens. Just like headcanon, that's what's gonna be the end of Reiju's story, is like that's gonna happen. And then, like, Sanji will, like, have, like, his restaurant in the all blue, and then she'll go and visit him there and everything. And they'll get to actually have, like, a better brother-sister relationship and all of that stuff. And maybe the boys will get their butts kicked into gear and, you know, get an attitude adjustment. I don't know. We'll see. So, that's what I have for this one. The next one and the final one for the Vinsmoke family, for the Germa Kingdom, will be, of course, my video about all three boys, about Ichiji, Niji, and Yonji, because they're mostly all together, so there's not much point in me trying to do individual videos for each one of them. So that's what I have. I thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day, and I hope you liked my glasses. Bye.